right, good to see everybody. First of all, it was really cool. It was amazing that Ben was coordinated enough to get his hands and his feet moving in all of those different directions. And the whole time you were doing that, I was just thinking, man, I would make a disaster of that. Like if you've ever seen me try to be coordinated, it's actually a funny thing to watch. Now, I could sell tickets and make money. I think I just realized a new revenue stream. The other thing is, will you put the worship background on that from that last song back up? Just real quickly, if you'll put that back up. Right now, it's Wicked Tuna season. That show is on Nat Geo. And here I am trying to worship Jesus, and I'm thinking, I bet there's a bluefin off of that rock right out there. And so we can't have those scenes anymore. It's distracting. Good to see everybody. We've been in this series titled Confidence. We're living in a time when people have very little confidence in very few things. These are uncertain times. I don't believe there's a lot that really feels like a firm foundation in this season. Financially, people are concerned. Governmentally, people are concerned. Relationally, people are concerned. With regard to mental illness, people are concerned. It's just not a great season. And if we look to what is around us for our confidence, we're hopeless, right? We're lost. If we look to what is around us for our confidence, then we have every reason to be without confidence. And that's why we're taking this time to point to things greater than the things around us. We're actually looking to God and knowing that in Him we can be confident. Now, today we're going to be talking about God's power, and we should know that we can be confident in the power of God. We see God's power in His Word. Like a jewelry store displays a beautiful diamond ring, the Bible puts on display the power of God. It starts with the very first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You only need to read the first verse of the Bible, and our introduction to God is that He has power to create. And that His creative power is seen in everything that is above us and everything that is around us. It has all been created by this God with creative power. He spoke light into existence. He established day and night. He divided the waters and created the heaven that is above us and the earth that is beneath us. He spoke dry land into existence. He spoke plants and vegetation into existence. Marine life and animal life. He spoke it all into existence. And with His hands, He formed mankind from the dust of the ground and breathed into His nostrils the breath of life. He established man as the keeper of the earth. This is our God. This is our mighty, powerful, majestic God. This God who has the power to create. That should leave us in awe of God. That He possesses this creative power. That is our introduction to Him. That He created planets and stars and galaxies. That He supports them all and upholds them all. The Bible says that all things are held together by the power of His Word. That is our God. This should leave us in awe of his power. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 12 and verse 18 and verse 28. Isaiah the prophet said, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? To whom then will you liken God? Or what likeness compare with him? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable." Isaiah was reminding those people, and he's reminding us, that neither man nor idol, anything created or uncreated, nothing can be compared to our great God. There's no power, no force, no energy that can be compared to our God. There is no time, no span that can be compared to our God. There is no measure, regardless of how great, that can be compared to our God. He is unmatched. He is unrivaled. He is unequal. He is uncomparable. He is our great God. And to declare his awesomeness, one only needs to use creation. Creation testifies of the awesomeness of God. How many people in the room, you are amazed by creation? It's incredible. There's so much of it that is known, but it's so vast, there's so much of it that is still unknown. Who else can measure the waters of the earth in the palm of their hand other than God? Water covers about 2/3 of the earth's surface. It's estimated that there is 82 billion gallons of water in the Atlantic Ocean alone. I don't know who went out there and measured all of it, but God bless them. 82 billion gallons of water in the Atlantic Ocean alone. And if it's accurate, it's said, one source said, that there is 326 million trillion gallons of water on the earth. All right, that's a great time to go, like, wow. 326 million trillion. I don't even understand that number. I went to school in North Carolina. I don't even know that I can count to 1,000,000. I know I can't begin to comprehend 326 million trillion. But our great God measured that in the palm of his hand. It points to the greatness of our God. Isaiah would say he only had to use his palm as a measuring cup. I'm talking about God, church. He's great. Amen. While the oceans are so vast and so incredible and so amazing, there's so much about the oceans that are still unknown. Now, I love documentaries. I watch virtually no, regular television programming at all. I don't watch any regular television shows. I don't enjoy it that much. But since I was a child, I love nature documentaries. Anything to do with nature, I love to watch those documentaries. And you know, the documentaries are becoming more advanced all the time. And I recently watched one on the oceans and deep sea life. And they're exploring depths now with modern technology that have never been explored before. And they're seeing animals that have never been seen before. They're discovering animals that have never even been known to mankind before in the depths of the ocean. And God not only measured the waters, but he created all of the life that's in the seas. And so Isaiah rightly points us to the oceans and says, Behold the power of God. And then Isaiah directs our attention to the heavens. Anyone in the room absolutely astounded by the heavens? You love to look at the stars, and it leaves you in awe. Or the moon, or the sun. You know, there are a lot of people who love to spend time looking up. They find solace in that. I know the skies aren't God, but for some reason, when I'm carrying something really heavy on me, I like to go outside and just look up at night and just talk to Him as best as I can, face to face. And I need that because the heavens declare His glory. And as I'm praying and I'm looking up, I'm reminded of His glory. Isaiah points us to the heavens. And this is what he said. God measured the heavens with a span. It's an ancient measuring technique. As a matter of fact, everybody, just for a moment, why don't you just play along and everybody hold out your thumb and hold up your index finger. Would you do that just very quickly? The space between your thumb and the end of your index finger is a span. It's how they would measure in ancient times. The God that you and I serve, for Him, the heavens is only a span. It's incredible. The nearest galaxy to ours that has recently been discovered, it's called the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy. I didn't name it. And if you could travel at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. Now pay attention, this is incredible. It would take you 25,000 years to reach that galaxy. So traveling at 186,000 miles per second, it would take you 25,000 years to reach that galaxy. There's now been a galaxy discovered that is directly perpendicular to our galaxy. It's called the Whirlpool Galaxy. It's 31 million light years away from where you're sitting right now. 31 million light years away. Let me try to put this in context, not as if we're going to comprehend it, but let me try. A light year is the distance a beam of light can travel over the course of a year, which is 6 trillion miles. So if you could travel 6 trillion miles a year, it would take you 31 million of those to reach that galaxy. Are you getting this? Does this blow anybody else's mind? I don't even comprehend it. And yet what I'm telling you is, God said, that looks about right. What an amazing God. It's incredible. And while that sounds shocking, that's just one galaxy. Just one. Scientists agree that our galaxy has around 100 billion other galaxies. And they estimate that each one of those suns have 100 billion suns. It's incredible. As a matter of fact, in our galaxy, the moon and the earth and the sun are about 93 million miles apart. I'm not going to take a detour here, but If the sun was any further away, there'd be no life on this earth. And if the sun was any closer, there would be no life on this earth. It's amazing, isn't it, that it's just at the exact right place. For anyone in the room who had a teacher who taught you that that happened by chance, they lied. It couldn't happen by chance. But 93 million miles apart really doesn't have anything to do with anything, but I just thought it was pretty cool. Mars is 142 million miles away from the sun. Now, right now, sitting in this building, does everybody feel fairly secure? All right, that was actually a question. I was talking, and then I asked you if you feel secure, and that was like your chance to jump in. So let's just pretend the first run never happened. How many people in the room, you feel pretty secure right now? Yeah, it feels pretty stationary. Everything feels fine. Right now, planet Earth, the planet that you're sitting on, is traveling through our galaxy at 67,000 miles per hour. So right now, where you're sitting, we're traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. And the earth is spinning 1,000 miles per hour. So where you're sitting right now, saying, I feel secure, we're traveling through a galaxy at 67,000 miles an hour, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. And for anybody who would say, well, that's incredible. No, God's incredible. Amen. That's the point of all of this. It amazes me, the earth is tilted on its axis at 23.5%. Anyone ever wondered when you look at the earth why it's a little sideways? Well, there's a reason for that. If the earth were not tilted at exactly 23.5%, the earth would become locked in a single position. If that were to happen, one side of the planet would grow so cold, life would not be possible. And one side of the planet would grow so hot that life would not be possible. God said, that's it. Isaiah would say, look at the heavens and see the power of God. Look at the heavens and see the greatness of God. And all of this vastness and all of this wonder, both known and unknown, God measured it with a span. Isaiah then directed our attention to the mountains. And he said the weight of the mountains to God is like weighing dust in a scale. The Appalachian Mountain Range is about 1,500 miles. I doubt anybody likes the kind of stuff I like, but I love to watch interviews on YouTube with the Appalachian people. And by the way, because of where I grew up, I can actually understand what they're saying. But the Appalachian Mountain Range, which the highest point of that mountain range is Mount Mitchell, which stands 6,684 feet tall. It's 1,500 miles long. And that sounds incredible until you go out west and you see the Grand Teton Mountains, and then you come back and you really appreciate the Appalachian Hills. I mean, they're nice. But what about if we were to travel to the Himalayan mountain range in Southeast Asia? That's 7,200 miles long. It includes 50 mountains and reaches a height of 23,600 feet. Wow. And those are just two of the mountain ranges out of all the mountains on our planet, and we live on a planet that's covered with mountains. And Isaiah would say, to God, it's like weighing dust in scales. It's nothing before him. Do you see what Isaiah has done? He chose the greatest, most expansive things that you and I know. For us, there's nothing more expansive than the seas. There's nothing more expansive than the heavens. And there's nothing greater and more expansive than the mountains. Isaiah chose the most expansive things he could reference, and he said to these incredibly large, enormous, massive things, they're nothing before God. The power of God is greater. Our God created them all. It's incredible. It's incredible. No wonder Jeremiah said in Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 17, "Ah, Lord God, it is you who have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." I didn't talk about all of these things so that you and I would be in awe of these things. I'm talking about these things so that we be in awe of God. These things should leave us in awe of God. No wonder David said in Psalm 33, verses 6 through 9, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made." God just spoke it. Does that amaze anybody? He just spoke it. "And by the breath of his mouth, all of their host." Literally, as God spoke, the imagery in this psalm is that he breathed out stars. God exhaled, and there were stars. Stars that dwarf the planet that you and I are living on. It's incredible. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap and puts the deeps in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. That is the power of our God. And I didn't even get into the formation of you. The fact that one cell from your mom and one cell from your dad created a unique DNA that is only you, and there will never be another like you. The fact that at the exact time you were supposed to form eyes in your mother's womb, 1 million or so cells were released, and they had to find their exact matches, and your eyes were formed, and then a little cutting device eventually formed and cut your eyelids so that your eyes would function. It's absolutely incredible. Didn't even talk about any of that. We serve a powerful God. Does anybody in the room believe that? We serve a powerful God. And then throughout all of the Bible, his power is put on display. But when you see his power in creation, really the things in the Bible are really barely even demonstrations of any power at all. I mean, Exodus 14 and 15, he parted the Red Sea, but what was that to a God who could breathe out stars? Joshua chapter 6, the collapse of the Jericho walls, God said, that's nothing. Judges chapter 7, Gideon defeating the army of the Midianites, that was nothing. 1 Samuel 17, God empowering a shepherd boy named David to defeat a giant named Goliath. That was nothing. Daniel chapter 3, he preserved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Luke chapter 1 gets a little more interesting now. His spirit overshadowed a virgin named Mary, and she conceived. Luke chapter 2, Jesus is birthed. Romans chapter 8, by the power of God, Jesus was resurrected from the dead. But what is that to the God who has the power over all of life? It's amazing. Our God is amazing. He's mighty. He's majestic. He's powerful. He's great. He's glorious. He's all things wonderful. And we should be in awe of him above all else. I would highly recommend a book titled Awe, A-W-E, written by Paul David Tripp. I believe everybody in the room ought to read it. You can get a digital copy, and it's not very expensive. It's an amazing book. And it just reminds us that in this culture, we have lost our awe of God. Like, isn't it amazing? We walk around staring at a cell phone all the time. I'm guilty. And we act as if we're amazed by the things we're seeing on a cell phone, and we're literally surrounded by the glory of God demonstrated through His creation. We've lost sight of awe. We serve a powerful God. And yet, in spite of His power, and in spite of His abilities, and in spite of His greatness, there are times when we doubt this powerful God. Once we put everything into perspective, I wonder how it looks when we're complaining to Him. Anybody ever been in the God advisory business? I have. Well, this is what I think you ought to do. Like, if you want my opinion, I know you didn't ask, but if you want my opinion, this is how I think everything ought to. Who am I to advise the God who upholds the universe by the power of His word? I'm ignorant. That's who I am. And we doubt this God. We don't understand His reasoning. We can't track His movements. We don't understand why He's doing what He's doing. And by the way, it isn't a sin to question God. How many of you have ever heard people say, it's a sin to question God? You can't question God. Anybody ever heard that? That's said a lot. And if you hear that, it's not true. Because if that were true, it means Jesus sinned on the cross. Because He said, my God, why? It's not a sin to question. And there are times when we spend time in the valley of doubt and through seasons of confusion. And it's during those times that we lose sight of God's power. It's what happened to a man named Job. I'm not going to go into Job's whole story, but his life was horrible. His children were all killed in a tragic accident all at once. All of his wealth was lost immediately. His health was taken away from him. You know it was bad because his wife was trying to encourage him to curse God so he could die. And Job had finally had enough. And Job decided he was going to ask God some questions. God, I have some things I want to say to you. This idea of calling God in on the carpet. By the way, one of the silliest things I ever heard and saw in all of my life, it was ignorance and stupidity on display. It was a televangelist, and he had his hand up, and he said, God, I command you. Wait a minute. You're not even a dust mite compared to all the oceans of the earth in comparison to God. But Job was having this moment when he was going to question God. And then God flipped the script, and God said, Job, let me ask you some questions. And God started asking Job questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you know so much. Who determined its dimensions and stretched out the surveying line? What supports its foundations and who laid its cornerstone as the morning stars sang together and all of the angels shouted for joy? Who kept the sea inside its boundaries as it burst from the womb? And as I clothed it with clouds and wrapped it in thick darkness, for I locked it behind barred gates, limiting its shores. I said, this far and no farther will you come. Here your proud waves must stop. Have you ever commanded the morning to appear and caused the dawn to rise from the east? Have you ever made daylight spread to the ends of the earth to bring an end to the night's wickedness? As the light approaches and the earth takes shape like clay pressed beneath a seal, it is robed in brilliant colors. The light disturbs the wicked and stops the arm that is raised in violence. Have you explored the springs from which the seas come? Have you explored their depths? Do you know where the gates of death are located? Have you seen the gates of utter gloom? Do you realize the extent of all the earth? Tell me if you know, where does light come from and where does darkness go? Can you take each to its home? Do you know how to get there? But of course you know this. God's saying, you think you know so much. Why don't you answer my questions? Pretty powerful moment. I read that and I can't help but think, I bet Job felt like it was a great time just to be quiet. But this is what God was doing in his questioning. He was pointing Job back to his power. God's questions, if you read that passage of Scripture, had everything to do with God reminding Job of his control. You know, when we doubt God and when we struggle and when we lack confidence, we need to be reminded that God's in control, that God has all power, that he has authority over everything, and we don't have to be afraid. A few moments ago, and I'm going to close with this, I read from Psalm 33, and it was about the power of God. Hopefully you remember it. It was only a few moments ago. God measuring the waters and God breathing out stars. But that wasn't the end of the psalm. No, Psalm 33 goes on not only to talk about God's power over the universe, and God's power in our life, but what about God's power when I'm struggling? What about God's power when I'm down? What about God's power when I'm doubting? What about God's power when I'm confused? Let me read the rest of the psalm, verses 13 through 15 and 18 through 22. The Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the children of man, which means that right now, traveling 67,000 miles an hour through a galaxy and spinning 1,000 miles an hour, God sees you. Now think about that. God sees you. So I promise when your life feels chaotic, God still sees you. From where he sits enthroned, he looks on all of the inhabitants of the earth, he who fashions the hearts of them all and observes all of their deeds. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield, for our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. So here's what I want you to leave with. How many of you other than me, and by the way, I want to do one whole sermon at some point in time on creation, on the complexity of all of it, on the fact that the salt content of the ocean is the same as in our body. Any higher, any lower, no life. I mean, it's just all of these things where God directly turned the dial to exactly the right place so that life could exist, so that you could exist. How many of you are amazed that God has enough power to create all of this? It's incredible, isn't it? Do you not believe if he has that kind of power, that he has the power to take care of you? That he has the power to watch over you? That he has the power to care for you? That he has the power to take care of you when you're down? To love you when you're broken? To secure you when you're doubting? To assure you when you're concerned? Makes me feel good to know that the God who has that kind of power takes care of me. I want to be just completely real and say this. There are times when I really struggle to get a hold of the idea that God's in control. Times when I struggle to rest in His promises. Times when I struggle to hold on to His hope. And the best cure for me during those times is to be focused on His power. To be reminded of His power. Because it's amazing when I see God is big, how that puts the rest of life into perspective. When we lose our awe of God, all of life is turned upside down. When we lose our awe of God, then doubt floods in. Despair floods in. Depression, discouragement, and all the rest. We can be confident in the power of God. Let's all stand. We're going to sing this great old hymn. It blessed our hearts in the first service. It was a good worship moment at the end of the last service, wasn't it? You know where you really see the power of God demonstrated? Not in the heavens, not in the oceans, not in the mountains. If you really want to see the demonstration of the power of God, it's in the John 3:16 so love of God. That God so loved us that He gave His Son that you and I could be saved and not perish. It's amazing, isn't it, that a God with that kind of power would give His Son to die on a cross for the redemption of people who are living in a vast universe of galaxies known and unknown, and yet the Bible never says, for God so loved the galaxies. Never. The Bible never says, for God so loved the planets. The Bible never says, for God so loved the oceans. The only thing that ever received the so love of God was you. And God demonstrated His so love by giving His Son, here it is, so that the gospel would be the power of God to salvation. Do you know how you can be saved today? By turning your life over to Him. You can be saved today by believing in Him, what He's done, not what you can do, but what He's already done. And I pray today that the power of salvation would be known in this room. Let's sing about our great God.
Oh Lord, my God.
Sing it, church.
When I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars.
Think about it.
I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed.
What's our response to that?
Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. And how great thou art.
How great thou art.
How great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee.
how great is our God?
How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And oh, we'll see how great is our God.
Sing it again. How great is our God?
How great is our